everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, which is a Companies House update. We are being joined by Mark Buckley today. He's just having a little problem just accessing the webinar, so these things are always sent to try us, aren't they? But there isn't any new major news, but I thought it would be useful just to have a recap on where we're up to. I can't believe that we're just over 6 months into the implementation of IDV now. It seemed like we've been talking about this forever, and I can remember talking about a year of pain as well, but that's 6 months in now, so hopefully everybody's got to grips with it and knows what they're doing, and you know, in another 6 months we're hoping that all your clients will have gone through IDV, everything's been filed at Companies House, and then we can get back to normal. Mark's just sent me an update. He said it just keeps timing out on him, so I'm sure that he's still trying to log in and join us today. There is a question box in the top right hand corner, so if you do have any questions, please put them in there and then we'll go through those at the end of today's session. I was going to start with his presentation, but I will get on to my bits. I'll do my bits first, and then hopefully he will join us and he can take us through the Companies House presentation that he was going to do for us. We've also had a new registrar that took place in October of last year as well. Not seen any major changes since the new registrar took up their place, but one of the things that they've definitely talked about is the fact that they will try to improve communication, and I have quite active communication with Companies House. They are usually quite helpful and responsive, but I do know that with contact centres there are a lot of problems in those areas. Most of the people work from home at Companies House, so I think there's training elements and communication elements in that as well. But the registrar said that he's aware of the problems that he's inherited, and it's not going to change overnight, but he is working towards that. So hopefully we will see some better communication as those months go on. So I'm just going to share my screen with you now and go through my part of the presentation. As usual, the actual slideshow doesn't work for me. I've still not managed to get to the bottom of why that is, but we'll just do it on this basis and go through the slides one by one. For any of those who've just joined us a little bit late, Mark Buckley is just having some connection issues, so hopefully he will join us soon. We hopefully will have a Companies House presentation before the end of today's session. I'm just going to go over some known issues with you first of all, and then we're going to have a little talk about ACSPs, because there was some talk about how to file documents with Companies House. You would also need to be registered as an ACSP, so we'll have a little chat about developments on that as well, and then we'll just go to a Q&A. Now he has just messaged me again, so just bear with me. I'm just going to stop sharing or pause sharing for a moment, and I'll have a look what he said now. Right, okay, he's going to go and speak to somebody in IT, because he's still having difficulties getting in there. So like I say, hopefully by the time I've gone through these bits, he will be able to join us. So we'll skip that bit for now. A lot of the issues that we had initially have been resolved now. There's a lot of problems with certain filings and things. I think there's still an issue with people understanding what the dates are that they need to file the IDV code. That's just been an ongoing thing. Nothing's changed. There's nothing to update there. So directors do it as part of the CS01 filing, but if they're also a PSC, you have to file the day after the due date. Our recommendation is just file both the day after the due date, and then you know that you're not forgetting to file something. And then the standalone PSC, so someone that's a PSC and not a director, files in their month of birth, and that stands. That's not changed at all. There were also issues with people receiving codes. There is a procedure you can contact Companies House. We did ask for a separate email address because there were backlogs when requesting the codes to be resent, but there don't seem to be many issues now, so they never implemented that for us. But what has come to light is issues with dates of birth. Now, I had a meeting with Mark last week just to talk about today's webinar. He said he wasn't surprised at all that there were these issues with the dates of birth. It was a surprise to me that it's such a big problem. Sometimes it can be simple typos, that the incorrect date of birth was entered when that person was appointed. There can be issues sometimes, you know how in the US they do it the other way around with the date and the month, so there have been some issues with that as well. And sometimes the dates of birth are just completely incorrect. I suspect that there have been situations where someone's wanted to incorporate a company or appoint somebody, they don't know the date of birth, so they've just put a guess in, and there were no checks completed, so it didn't matter until now, and the dates of birth must match the appointment and the IDV code, so that's where these anomalies are being thrown up. And unfortunately, depending on how that person was appointed, there are different ways that you can then remedy that. So for anybody after today's webinar, we can provide the slides so that you can have all this information to hand, so that you will know what to do if one of those situations crops up, because it can be complicated. So first of all, we'll look at director appointed from incorporation. Now, this only applies if the company was incorporated after the 1st of October 2009, and that ties into the implementation of the Companies Act 2006 that happened on that date. So if the company was incorporated with this person appointed before that date, then you can just simply file a 288C with Companies House, and that will update the details and the date of birth. If it's after that date, then you need an RP01 form. You need the directors page from the IN01, which is the form that's used for incorporating a company. You only need the sections D1 to D4 for it, but you also need some evidence to show the correct date of birth and why this is being changed. Now, if you're going down this route and this is the problem for you, then all the forms need to be sent to Companies House by post. If you needed an IDV code when the original filing took place, then there will be a section where you need to enter that IDV code as well. So that's the situation where the director was appointed on incorporation. If they were appointed using an APO1, again, if it's after the 1st of October 2009, then you will need an APO1 and an RPO1 as well. Before that date, again, you can use a 288C. Now, in this case, the amending APO1 can actually be web filed, and that will take 1 to 3 days to update. But if you haven't got the authentication code, then again, it needs to go through the post, and that will take a bit more time. It'll take about 3 to 4 weeks on average, we're finding, for that information to be updated. And you may also have that issue of you were trying to file the CSO1, so that might be late, and we'll get on to that in a moment about what to do if the CSO1 is becoming overdue as well. If it was a PSC and they're appointed from incorporation, then because PSCs didn't come in before the 1st of October 2009, you don't need to use the pre-date form for that. You'll need an RPO1, you'll need the PSC pages of the INO1, which is section 5, and again, you need evidence to show that the date of birth is correct. And again, that evidence and the forms need to be sent to Companies House by post and include the IDV code. If it happened from the 18th of November, then you'll need to include the IDV code in there. Again, we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks for that to be updated. And obviously that's dependent on Companies House turnaround times within there. And then if the PSC was appointed on a confirmation statement, then you'll need the PSC01 and an RPO1, and again, the evidence to show that the date of birth is correct. Again, you send those forms to Companies House by post, and the turnaround time is about 2 to 3 weeks on that as well. If the PSC registering was done under a PSC01, then again, it's a PSC01 and RPO1. Now, the PSC01 in this situation can be web filed as well. And again, include the IDV code if you need to. Again, if there's no authentication code, then you'll need to send those forms by post as well. So it can be a bit confusing knowing which forms are required for which situation. So hopefully that sets out exactly what you need to do. And like I said before, if you've just joined us, then we can provide copies of these slides after today's webinar. And then you can just keep those so that you know which process to follow. Again, we have had some more people join us, so unfortunately Mark Buckley is having issues connecting to the webinar, so hopefully he will still be joining us to do his presentation, but we're just moving on with the bits that I was going to do in the meantime. So if you have a problem and you can't file the CSO1, usually the reason because the date of birth is incorrect, and you're going to have to go through a process to be able to do that as well. There is a process which is called making a representation that you can do with Companies House. Now, the circumstances need to be exceptional to be able to apply to make this representation, and there is a link on the slide as well which takes you through to the correct page to be able to go through that procedure, because there's a form that needs to be filed. Now, there's a window that you can do this representation in. So you can't do it until you've received a letter saying that the confirmation statement is overdue, and then they give you 28 days to be able to make the representation. So if you haven't had the letter, your application will get rejected. So it's important to wait for the letter to be sent first of all. So you can use this form if you're waiting on the identity verification for a person and that has delayed the confirmation statement being filed. Again, I've included the link there if you need that and you need to go through this process. It must be done within 28 days. Companies House can make enforcement action. We have seen companies being dissolved because they've not filed the CSO1s and they've not completed the IDV. I've not heard of any penalties being put into place yet, but they are definitely going through the dissolution process. So that is something that you need to be careful about. And if you do get accepted, then you will be given an extra couple of months to be able to comply with the new legislation. So this is important, and I think it's important that if you do have any problems, you go through this process. But they will only consider, it's not a guaranteed process that will automatically give you an extra couple of months. They will look at the evidence that you're providing as to why you haven't been able to fulfill this requirement, and they will let you know whether you've been successful or not. Once they've made that decision, there's no appeal against that. But if they do it, they will pause the enforcement action for a couple of months to give you time to file that statement, and that will give you time to get the director or PSC verified in order to fulfill these requirements. So just to recap on that, so making a representation does mean that you tell Companies House about exceptional circumstances why you can't file the CSO1. You can only make that representation in that window of receiving the letter and then being given 28 days, otherwise it will be rejected. And to complete the form, you need to give your full name and address, the company name, the company number, the date on the default letter as well. So that's why it's important that you've had that letter before you go through this process, and information about the exceptional circumstances. It could be that somebody's in hospital and not been able to complete it at that point in time. You can also upload 2 pieces of evidence to support your request, and I would fully recommend that you do that if you have that available, because that's going to help your case in the long run as well. So they're the 2 main issues that I wanted to talk about today. It's also in previous webinars that we've done, there's been conversation about this was the first stage of being an ACSP, and in order to be able to file a confirmation statement on behalf of another company, you need to be registered as an ACSP, so an authorised corporate service provider. And there's certain criteria as to who can be that ACSP as well. You have to be regulated under AML, you have to be UK based. But the second stage that we've mentioned on a few occasions is that they're going to implement any filings, you have to be registered as an ACSP. So that's the second stage and the presenter requirements. The last news on that, and I had that confirmed by Mark last week, was that it won't be before November of this year. Now, officially, and I can say this because he's not on the call yet, officially, they're nowhere near getting this ready. So it's nothing that anybody needs to panic about at the moment. For filing accounts, for filing mortgage and charges, you would have to be an ACSP once this part of the legislation comes in. But at the moment, you only need it to file a CSO1. You can register now anyway, so you can get it all out of the way so that you're ready when it comes to that part. But it won't be before November of this year. And although he can't confirm it, it definitely isn't going to be this year either. Now, just bear with me a second because I've had another message from him. So I'm just going to pause sharing a moment while I just have a look at his latest message. Right, unfortunately, he's saying that nothing is working. Every time he tries to log in, it kicks him out. He's downloaded the app and it just won't connect. So it does look as if Mark won't be joining us today, but I'll come back to that at the end when I've gone through everything that I need to go through. So that's where we are with the ACSP part of things. So there's no new news. Oh, hello. Are you a little bit stressed?
It is what it is.
Right, well, luckily I've just gone through all my bits. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will pass straight over to you. I've been telling them that you would hopefully be joining us to do your presentation, and yay, you're here.
I'm just managing in time. Yeah, it only took me 40 minutes, something like that, to actually get this thing to work.
Yeah.
So if it dies, hopefully.
Okay. Are you able to turn up your volume a little bit as well?
Yeah, bear with me a second. Is that better?
A little. If you can do a bit more, that would be even better.
Let me have a look. Audio settings. I can shout.
Just shout. It's a long way away, Wales.
It is. Yeah. No.
Right.
My volume is at max.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
okay. If anybody's struggling, then maybe they can just turn up their own volume on their own computers just to be able to hear you. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Okay. Well, I won't try and share my screen because I'm having lots of technical difficulties. So I'll run through a quick presentation. It should only take about 10-15 minutes, if that. And then if there are any questions, I'm sure that Liz can sort of shout those out to me. So as probably everybody on the call knows, Companies House has been going through a huge transition, an amount of change since the introduction of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill. And as a result of that, we've come up with a new sort of purpose and mission. So by 2030, Companies House, it will be the trusted guardian of corporate transparency, acting as a catalyst for economic growth while protecting businesses and people from harm. So this is obviously an expanded purpose, building on the sort of new powers that we got under the ECCTA. We'll still continue to grant limited liability through incorporation and register company information, but we'll now be able to take a more active role in disrupting economic crime and take an even greater role in supporting economic growth. So, as I said, the ECCTA gives us new powers and helps us play a more significant role in tackling economic crime. Over time, the measures will lead to improved transparency and more accurate and trusted information on the registers. So, as I say, we've got new powers to sort of prevent, remove, replace, and more importantly, sort of prevent information going onto the register in the first place. as well as the introduction of sort of ID and identity verification and introduction of authorized corporate service providers. So the timeline, as I say, we introduced our first measures on the 18th of March of 2025. ACSP launched, and then in April 25, identity verification was launched. And we launched both of these early to allow people to sort of get ready for identity verification. And IDV became compulsory to register either on incorporation or provide identity verification credentials with alongside your confirmation statements from the 18th of November. So we've been going now just a little over 6 months, and we've ingested something like 5 million or 5 million sort of IDs have been identity verified successfully on the register, and we're still well over 5 million to register, but we'll pick those up in the sort of next part of the transition. The transition period ends for the completion of identity verification in November this year. As I say, started last year, so it should end in November this year, but we'll keep registering identities probably well into sort of December and January, where we pick up the sort of late filers and those people who are running against issues with the data not matching the ID. The next sort of phase, and it's quite a large phase, is implementation of presenter filings. So that's where anybody filing information with the registrar needs to make themselves known, and we aren't going to start that any earlier than November this year, but it's more likely to commence sort of later than that. But we made a commitment that we won't start it before the end of the IDV transition. And then finally, sort of 2 more things: limited partnership reform. That'll be introduced no later than the end of 2026, and then shareholder and accounts reform dates will not be sort of April 2027, but they're likely to be later than that. So identity verification implementation, as I said, became mandatory on the 18th of November. We've ID'd more than 4 million unique individuals, and as I say, we've ingested over 5 million IDs onto the system. But that's obviously where people have got more than one sort of identity and persona within our system. Hopefully, ID creates barriers for criminals whilst making it easier for legitimate businesses to operate with confidence. And we have sort of made the commitment to try to make the UK corporate register the gold standard for transparency and reliability worldwide as a result of the identity verification implementation. But this will only sort of start to truly manifest itself when we also introduce the presenter filings. The key focus this year is going to be to look at the sort of compliance activity around identity verification to make sure that everybody that's required to ID does so. We have started, or we're about to start, compliance activity against those who have failed to verify their identity, and we'll take a fair and proportionate approach to enforcing the law. We've also published our approach to non-compliance with identity verification, and I'll share this presentation with Liz so that she can pass it around to everybody on this webinar. As I say, we are really pleased with how IDV is going. We have sort of registered nearly half of the register, and as I say, there's still half of the register left to go as part of the transition. And for those who don't comply with IDV, we'll take the action in line with the following approach and our general compliance framework. As guiding principles, we will aim to ensure transparency, consistency, proportionality, making sure that it's targeted and accountable. And our approach to enforcement includes 4 broad categories. Informing people of their obligations, well, that's an ongoing thing. We are regularly updating communication. We notify companies that that are due to file confirmation statements that their identity verification needs to be done. We nudge and provide guidance, and then ultimately we'll deal with any non-compliance, and potentially we'll address fraud and any criminal activity that we identify. Alongside the identity verification, we introduce authorised corporate service providers. An authorised corporate service provider, or an ACSP, is simply a third-party agent registered for anti-money laundering in the UK. And to date, we've registered just over 20,000 ACSPs. At the moment, all ACSPs can do is undertake IDV for their clients and provide that information to the registrar. But when we introduce presenter filings, probably sometime next year, then anybody that is filing on behalf of a third party will need to be registered as an authorised corporate service provider in order to do that, whether they do identity verification or not. We also have the power to suspend or deauthorise ACSPs as needs be, and we have started this process already. If an ACSP is identity verifying people, obviously they need to keep the ID standard for 7 years post-ID, and Companies House standard is different, requirement that AML know your client checks. So an ACSP cannot or should not identity verify themselves as part of their process, and Companies House can query the processes to ensure they are well maintained and retrievable upon request. It's also an offence not to respond to a query from Companies House, and may result in a suspension of your ACSP if you fail to do so. Excuse me. As I said, the next phase and the next big phase is filing restrictions or presenter requirements. So in the future, those submitting information to Companies House will need to be identity verified. So if they are filing for their own company, directors or a PSE, they need to be identity verified and provide those credentials, or they need to be registered as an authorised corporate service provider to file on behalf of a third-party company. And this relates to any filing of any document on the register. Section 1067A of the Companies Act outlines the new restrictions around filing documents with Companies House, and the restrictions will be brought in no earlier, as I mentioned, before November 2026. We are currently looking at prioritising the completion of identity verification for directors and PSEs, and don't want to introduce what is a significant process on top of something that's already in train. And as I mentioned, sort of the people who can file when presenter filings come in is any individual who is identity verified, an individual ACSP, an officer or an employee of an ACSP, or if they're a firm, an identity verified officer or employee of that firm, an identity verified officer or employee of a corporate officer or firm, an individual ACSP, or an officer or an employee of an ACSP. As I say, the presenter filings are not going to come in before November this year, and as soon as we have sort of dates for implementation and how that implementation is going to be rolled out, we will communicate it through our usual channels. And if anybody isn't already signed up to our sort of campaign site on gov.uk, we regularly post gov.uk blogs, we have social media channels, or you can subscribe to our newsletter at stakeholder engagement at companieshouse.gov.uk. And that's me. I'm not sure if there's any questions.
Right. Thank you very much for that. I think that that's really helpful, and I think it's really good as well. You know, people hear these things from me, but it's really good to hear it direct from the horse's mouth, as you like to say. We have had a few questions. So Aoife's asked, if there's a time frame for when an officer of an RLE would need to get IDV'd?
Not at the moment. This is still in policy development, sort of. And as I say, as and when we get any information about what those changes are likely to be, when they are likely to be implemented, we'll communicate it. But until then, it's only natural persons linked to a company that need to identity verify.
Yeah, it's something that I get asked a lot, actually, but I've not heard any time frames mentioned, so it's definitely not going to be anytime soon, is it? Somebody's asked, I was talking earlier about how to correct the dates of birth.
Yeah.
And for the different, if it's a director appointed on an APO1 or incorporation, and the different ways of doing that. And part of that is that if you're correcting a date of birth, you also need to send in evidence of the correct date of birth. Somebody wondered whether an expired passport is okay for that, and whether you think that that will be accepted.
I don't know whether it would be accepted, but it is a valid sort of identity document. You know, you can't travel abroad with it, but it's still a valid identity document with your date of birth on it. So I can take that away and ask if it's
yes, please.
I know you can use an expired passport within certain parameters to actually do the ID.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't see it not being an issue for the evidence for date of birth.
Okay.
I'll take that away and ask Liz, because I genuinely don't know.
Okay. I've been asked if the beta service is going to be improved because it constantly crashes.
We are constantly working on the beta service. It is a known issue that we've. It is something that we are constantly monitoring and constantly trying to fix and iterate. It's certainly a big problem when we launched IDV. The system fell over and the guys crawled all over it, and we are still looking at it to try to make sure that system is more robust than it is.
Okay.
I'm not a technical person, but it's a known problem and we are actively trying to fix it.
Okay. If an ACSP was removed, what would happen to their submissions, their IDV submissions that they'd already made? Would they be looked into?
It depends why they were removed. So at the moment, nearly all suspensions and cessations of ACSPs are simply as a result of no longer having supervisory status. So either the organization has sort of ceased, or they no longer want their ACSP, or they just let their supervision lapse. But there's been no indication that anything they did whilst they were an ACSP was wrong.
Right.
If however we had sort of suspicions that the identity verifications by that ACSP were suspicious or suspect in any way, then we are looking at introducing a re-verification process. So some or all of those individuals may have to undergo re-ID again.
Okay, that's interesting. Somebody's just asking for clarification again on being an ACSP and whether they need to be an ACSP to file CSO1s or accounts after November. And the case is no, you only need to be an ACSP to conduct IDV at the moment. I think I might have said CSO1 a bit earlier, and that was just my slip up. I meant to do IDV. You need to be an ACSP, but we have no date to file accounts or CSO1s.
No, we don't have a date, a sort of set in stone date or an indicative date for presenters yet. It won't be before November, but how long it'll be after November, I don't know.
Okay.
As I say, it is a huge piece of development, so But as soon as we know, we let everybody else know, and then you know what your requirements are.
Okay, somebody's asking if there'll be more stakeholder engagement with key people affected, such as law firms. This is to do with the ACSP presenter requirements regarding the proposals and when it'll be implemented before it goes live. I mean, I feel like you already do quite a lot of that anyway.
Yeah, so when we introduced identity verification and authorized corporate service providers, obviously there's a lot of user testing that goes on. There was a hell of a lot of sort of webinars, blogs, inviting people onto our user panels. So if anybody is on this call that wants to sort of add themselves to the user panels to sort of get involved in the testing and the iteration of the presenter stuff, then please reach out, and we can get you added to those. But as we start to develop the sort of the processes and things, there will be a huge sort of comms campaign on the back of that, to sort of get everybody sort of up to speed, involved. And I dare say people will be wandering around the country and doing webinars and things just to get that message across.
Yeah, we will definitely help with that as well. Next question, what kind of things have caused the forced removal of an ACSP?
To date, basically letting the supervisory status lapse. All right, so you have to be supervised by an AML. So if for whatever reason you've forgotten to renew your supervisory status, and some ACSPs with certain supervisory bodies are worse at that than others. We share data with supervisory bodies monthly, and every month we get a report of who is and who is no longer supervised, and we simply suspend them. Some of those individuals have moved from one supervisor to another. They give us the details, we check it, and then we make them back live. And that's about 60-70% of the process. The other 30% are either no longer required, they've retired, people deceased, things like that. There are one or two that we've suspended for naughtiness, for want of a better word, but those processes haven't fully matriculated yet. So I don't know what the sort of outcome of that are, but the majority of everything that's on our ceased and suspended list is sort of simply as a result of managing the data set, rather than sort of any sort of fraud or criminality that we are finding.
Yeah, okay. Somebody's made a comment about people who are having severe issues getting verification done through the Companies House site. Any advice on getting it actioned? And they feel that the help desk isn't particularly helpful. I don't like to use webinars as sales pitches, but I will say that we do offer an IDV service for people that are having difficulties. And I will say I did my IDV through the Companies House system and I had no problem, but I know some people do have problems with it. We can offer a service. It's a low cost service. It's £25 plus VAT per ID verification. So if you are having problems, please reach out to us and we'll see if we can help with that. I don't know if you've got anything further to add about your system.
Yeah, so if individuals are experiencing difficulties using that system, okay, you can help them through the system. Obviously you can't do the ID for them and take the selfies, but you can help them through the system. There is a route through that system for them to go via a post office. You can book in at the local post office, and the post office will help them get the identity verification done as an assisted digital service. So oddly enough, you have to go through the digital service to get your assisted digital service. But as I say, you can answer the questions, go through, and then get the appointment in the post office in your area, and then that individual can go there and get that done as well. Or as I say, there's authorized corporate service providers around the country, such as Liz, that offer the services as well.
Okay. I've got a question regarding financial statements. I'm not sure that this is your area, but if not, then we can take this question forward, can't we? And then get an answer on it. Somebody's saying they've had a couple of examples when incorrect auditor's report was filed with the financial statements. The financial statements were correct, and they're not revised. Can the replacement of a document be used in this case instead of filing revised financial statements? Is that something you'd like us to take forward to?
It is. I think the replacement process might be the route, rather than a revised set of accounts, because the accounts are fine. The auditor statement is incorrect. But again, that is not an area I am an expert in. You've got to be able to count to be able to do financial statements.
Okay, I know, Aoife, that one was from you, so I'll make sure I take that one forward. Someone's asking if you're seeing a big upturn in resignations of directors as a result of IDV, and are bogus companies being unearthed during this process as well. I guess it's a bit too early to know why potentially someone hasn't done IDV.
Funny enough, I was looking at stats this morning around the second question, are there bogus companies? So out of the possible companies or possible identity verifications that we should have had by now, I think there's something like 1.2 million that haven't registered, all right, for whatever reason. But we do know that there are reasons for this, right? So if the date of birth in the system, which is a big issue because people have filed their dates of birth incorrectly, you need to fix that before you can IDV. So there's a lag. Then you've got, on top of that, you've got the natural sort of lateness of confirmation statements, which will be added into that pot. So once we get all the way through transition, and we have a couple of months after transition where we would expect to pick up all of the late IDVs, it's at that point that we would know sort of the level of bogusness potentially on the public record, and as part of the sort of confirmation sort of statement. Whether or not we've seen a lot of resignations, I don't know, but I can find out. I was thinking of this again for some reason, walking down the corridor this morning, about whether or not we are seeing sort of a lot of incorporations not being registered because of dates of birth within the IDV. And again, I was expecting a lot of incorporations before IDV kicked in, but we didn't see a huge spike in it.
Right.
So I don't know whether people are resigning or whether they just not going to bother IDVing and just not engage with us, and then we'll pick up that.
Yeah.
It's something I can find out, Liz.
Somebody's asked, I'll take this one. Why, when people did IDV, why didn't Companies House correct dates of birth rather than introducing a complicated system? Firstly, when somebody does IDV, it doesn't link to a company. So someone could do IDV that's not a director or a PSC. There'd be no purpose, but they could do it. It's not until you file a confirmation statement that it's linked, and then it can be seen that the date of birth doesn't match. But also, Companies House doesn't have that power to just be able to go into a company's record and change that information as well. Do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so the reason we didn't fix people's dates of birth is we didn't know about it. Well, we knew that there was lots of incorrect date of birth in our system, but obviously we don't know what those people's actual dates of birth are. The registrar has no power just to go in and fiddle with data unless there is some kind of evidence to be able to fix that data, because obviously everything we hold is in the public record and the registrar is responsible for it. And unfortunately, the method for fixing data on the public record is the paper record, which is slow and it takes time. Plus the scale of the error on our database. The other question I could ask is, why didn't they give us the right data in the first place?
It's a really good. It's a really good point. It's something that I mentioned at the beginning as well. That you anticipated it. I hadn't seen it being such a big problem, but
if for whatever reason an ACSP mistypes a date of birth, then that's a digital process that the ACSP can fix. And I think we're on day 1 or day 2 with that, so that gets turned down really, really quickly. But if it's incorrect on the public record, then that takes a bit longer.
Yeah. I think the next question we've already answered. Is it mandatory to register for an ACSP for filing accounts? No, and we have no date for that. Yes, it was originally spring 2026, but that was delayed, and we don't currently have a date on that. So just to go back to that.
When we introduce presenters, it will become mandatory for you to submit accounts, even if you go through a software provider. That software provider may or may not be an ACSP, but you as the presenter using the software will need to be an ACSP in order and provide the credentials through that service.
Okay, and somebody's asking if Companies House call handlers are fully trained in IDV, because they've asked a question to on 2 different occasions, same question to 2 different people, and got 2 different answers.
Yeah, so my understanding is that all identity verification questions are not handled by our call center. The really, really basic ones are, but generally questions get pushed through to a team, and that team sort of answers the questions and then passes it back to our contact center. It's the same for the ACSP queries. The call center don't handle those. They pass them directly into a Companies House team, which is set up for that. So if you are experiencing sort of differences in the responses, if you feed that back either through myself or through inquiries, and then we can pick that up, because it may well be a training issue, or it may be that you had a more experienced examiner the first or second time and a less one the first time, and they give you a different or an incomplete answer. Yeah,
I mean, I don't mean to cause offence, but I think it's always been that way, hasn't it, with lots of different things. I'm happy for people to contact me if they want an answer on something as well. They can always reach out to me. Somebody's asking whether they've recommended to clients to get a passport because they didn't have any photo ID, and whether this was the best advice. I know a number of people that have gone down this road. There are other options, aren't there? You can also, if you've not got photo ID, you can link it to a bank account and answer questions on that as well. There's also, people can do in-person checks rather than using technology when you have to upload photo ID. The in-person checks gives more availability to different types of documents, but not so many people do the in-person checks because you have to be specialists trained in fraud detection, and that can be quite costly, and sometimes it's actually cheaper and quicker to get the passport than it is to go down that road. But there are other options available. I know somebody within our company tried, because we wanted to test out the linking to the bank account. Sometimes the questions can be quite difficult, and so that's not a possibility either. So I mean, there isn't an ideal situation, is there, when somebody hasn't got photo ID, but getting a passport is one road, I would say, that people could go down.
Yeah, and I would say that is a good option, particularly for those who are doing the identity verification, because at the end of the day, the risk remains with the ACSP. So if you want a surety that that person is who they say they are, then, and they haven't got photo ID, then the best advice is to go and get photo ID. As I say, you can go through the one login, the one ID system, and go through a non-photo ID process, but it's asking you all sorts of questions about bank accounts and mortgage state and all sorts of things. And it is by far our highest fallout rate of failure, because I don't know about anybody else on this call, although you're probably more numerate than me. I haven't a clue what I spent out of my bank account on the 3rd of May, you know, and things like that. So it is a much more challenging route. It is available, but it is not, and unless you've got no intimate details about all of your finances you haven't to hand, so you can just flip through and answer the questions. It is a more challenging route.
It is, definitely. I'm going to make this the last question because we're running out of time. Somebody's gone to the post office to take their document into the post office, and the post office told them that they had to have 18 months left on the passport before expiry. They questioned with Companies House and they said that's not the case, and the post office staff said it's a post office rule. I would say that's not correct. I would say that that's somebody in that post office that's misunderstood the rules.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, as I say, you can identity verify through our process with an out-of-date passport. So the post office should simply be adhering to our requirements. And this has all been sort of set out. So yeah, and the 18-month thing, you know, I'm not sure that's a requirement. No. I know there's a requirement to have your passport within a certain amount of time to travel in Europe and things now.
But that's usually 6 months anyway, isn't it? So,
6 months or 18
yeah,
months.
I don't know where they've got that one from, but no, it's not correct. Yeah. Right. Okay. There were a few more questions. We've not got time right now, but I can assure everybody we will get back to you if your question hasn't been answered. I'm out of the office for a couple of days, so if I don't get back to you straight away, that will be why. I want to thank Mark. Thank you so much for persevering to try and get on the call, for one thing. And as always, it's been really useful. So thank you for your time today, and thank you everybody else for attending. I hope it's been useful for you, and we'll see you again soon. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.